But now the new.
Good evening.
Evening.
Good evening.
Good evening. Hi, Chudo.
Better? So I'm Dana Cunningham. I'm the Dean of Tisch College, and I'm really excited to invite all of you to the first of the spring Solomont Speaker Series. Our first guest is the wonderful Minnesota Attorney General, Keith Ellison. It is great to see so many of you here in person. Are we also broadcasting?
Yes.
Great. Also great. So many of you have joined us online. Before we get started, I want to thank our event co-sponsors, the Political Science Department, the Tufts University Prison Initiative of Tisch College, or TUPIT. I also want to thank Susan and Alan Solomont, whose support and leadership makes this event possible and other events like this. We're lucky enough to have Alan, who is the Tisch Dean Emeritus.
Has been.
Emeritus. Here with us tonight, we are tremendously grateful for his ongoing partnership and friendship. We hope you'll join us in the mezzanine after the forum ends, where Attorney General Ellison will be signing copies of his book, Break the Wheel. Break the Wheel, Ending the Cycle of Police Violence. Copies of the book will be available for purchase. And stay tuned for our full lineup of spring semester events. That'll be announced next week. Now it is my honor to introduce Attorney General Ellison. Attorney General Ellison was elected as Minnesota's top lawyer in 2018, becoming the first African-American and the first Muslim American to be elected statewide in the state of Minnesota. Unbelievable, it was just 2018. He is well known. He's a well-known leader for criminal justice reform and accountability, serving as the lead prosecutor of the death of George Floyd in Minneapolis and leading the team that successfully convicted former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin on a charge of second-degree murder. Ellison later wrote Break the Wheel about this experience. Previously, Ellison represented Minnesota's 5th Congressional District in the U.S. House of Representatives. He also served 4 years in the Minnesota House of Representatives and spent 16 years as an attorney specializing in civil rights and defense law. In conversation today with Attorney General Ellison is Tufts Professor of the Practice of Political Science, Samuel Gabrew. Professor Gabrew is a social entrepreneur, community organizer, educator, advocate, and policy analyst with over 17 years of political and nonprofit experience in the United States and in East Africa. In addition to his role on campus, he is the managing director of Black Lion Strategies, a social impact and public affairs consulting firm, and is a senior advisor at DeWitt Impact Group. Attorney General Ellison will kick us off with brief remarks, and then he and Professor Gabrew will be in conversation together before we open up the discussion to all of you. Please join me in welcoming Attorney General Ellison.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks for having me. I'm so honored to be here. And let me say thank you to our dean. And it's been such a pleasure to come to this wonderful institution. Certainly Tufts is a tremendous institution, respected all over the world, certainly in where I'm from in Minnesota. And Dean Emeritus Squared, it's great to be with you, and thank you for all you've done for this great institution. And it's really good to be with you all this week in particular. This is an interesting week. A lot of things have happened. I don't know if you noticed. But this week, no matter what political persuasion you may be coming from, we've seen dramatic shifts in the world and the way we were used to living. We started out being told that a precedent of 127 years, which is birthright citizenship, now the president doesn't like it and wants to get rid of it. This same precedent, understand, is founded on the 14th Amendment, which was written in direct refutation to the Dred Scott case, in which Chief Justice Roger Taney said that Black people were not citizens and had no rights, which a white man was bound to respect. His words, not mine. So this week, this age-old concept, not questioned ever since 1898. Now, okay, we're not doing that anymore. Well, we'll see. We should sue them, and we'll find out where it all lands. But then we're told that if local officials in Massachusetts, Minnesota, and many other places do not voluntarily cooperate, again, from their language, then they're going to prosecute us. Strange, because back when Trump 1 was in office, they tried to coerce local officials to do the work of the federal government immigration services. We went to court and told them, we're going to do our job and you do yours, and we won. And yet, here we go again with these sort of threatening, menacing sort of comments. We're told that transgender people don't exist. Only men and only women. Well, the truth is, most people do identify as either men or women, but we do have fellow Americans who identify as trans. It is biological fact that some people have genetics that indicates that that is who they are. And yet still these people are made to feel that either they don't exist or they certainly are not welcome in our community. This is contrary to our values. And we live in a country that says liberty and justice for all. And all means all. It doesn't mean all except trans people. It means all. And so this is the week that we just had. And so I came here with every intention to talk to you about how we break the wheel of 100 years of unaccountability when it comes to state actors using unreasonable force against citizens and the unaccountability that we've seen connected to that. And I want to tell you that this is a very important topic, but it's really a small door to a larger room where I hope we discuss a whole lot of other things. I cannot say one more word until I ask you to put your hands together for my brother, Anthony Robert Ellison, right back there. Thanks for being here. You know, Tony's a lawyer in Dorchester, you know, if you ever need a lawyer, you know, call Tony. It's fun. Anyway, this is a very important moment to be having this conversation. Let me just say, you know, when George Floyd was killed on the streets of Minneapolis, there was nothing particularly Minneapolis about it. There was nothing particularly new about it. In fact, it was shocking because it was not shocking. We've all seen the cases ever since. Some of you are old enough to remember Rodney King. Some of you might even be old enough to remember Isaac Woodard. Does anybody know who Isaac Woodard is? Isaac Woodard was a man who had served his country honorably in the United States military in World War II. Maybe nobody old enough to know that. But Isaac Woodard had his eyes jammed out with a nightstick by a sheriff in South Carolina. And when the NAACP got word of it, they ended up going to talk to President Truman. President Truman was so shocked that he ordered his attorney general to have that sheriff prosecuted. At the trial, the prosecutor said, did you maim Isaac Woodard? And the witness said, the defendant took the stand in his own defense and said he did do it. And he said, because he was sassing me and mouthing off. But we don't have that down here for people like that. He was acquitted. And what really happened after that, it may shock you to know, is that the judge got radicalized because of that case. The judge, Judge Watis Waring, Warring, got so amazed and shocked by that he went on to be a famous civil rights judge. And when Thurgood Marshall would come in front of him, he'd say, I want you to bring an education case in front of me. I want you to bring a discrimination case, a housing case. And I think it probably would be ex parte violation nowadays, but they had their own rules in those days. And he wrote a very important opinion called the Elliott versus Griggs, which was a case that was joined with a case you may have heard of called Brown versus Board of Education, in which he found that education was separate but equal, was fundamentally unconstitutional. And there's a whole story to that. I recommend you read about Isaac Witter's story. But this is all this train of events of what we call police brutality, but which really is a violation of the Fourth Amendment. Let me go on here. I don't know how to make this thing go. Okay, so before we go on, and I gotta be quick, I want to talk to you about the status quo. Here's the status quo. The status quo is that about 1,000 people are killed by the police annually. The status quo is that there were only 10 days where police were not involved in an incident involving civilian death. Not all of them are illegal, by the way. But I just want to make it clear that we live in a society where violence is not as commonplace, and police violence is also commonplace. Want to let you know that public records from 31 of 50 cities with the highest police to civilian ratios show that cities have spent more than $3 billion to settle police misconduct cases. And let me tell you, as a lawyer who sued on behalf of plaintiffs who've been injured in these tragic incidents, it's hard to get money out of these cities. You don't just, you got to prove your case. But let me tell you, you look at some cities like New York, they paid in 2019, they paid out $175 million in civil judgments. Chicago, $85 million. And since 2003, Minneapolis police have paid out, Minneapolis has paid out over $100 million in police misconduct cases. Now that money is not going to parks, it's not going to roads, it's not going to more police officers, it's just money that these citizens are owing and have to go out. That's the status quo. Also, the status quo is civil unrest. Let me tell you, it's almost like a law, it's like a law of gravity. If you have unchecked tragic incidents between police and community, you're going to have civil unrest. There's no city that hasn't had it. Some of you will remember Los Angeles and Rodney King, but that's just one of many, many, many. There have been many incidents like that. Teaneck, New Jersey, cities big and small, Chicago, Miami. You heard Trump say when the looting starts, the shooting starts. He actually was quoting a police chief in Miami. So, so that's the status quo. Also, our justice system, 1/3 of wrongful convictions involve some sort of wrong action by police, either tampering with a witness, untrue statements under oath, things like that. And there's one thing that I mentioned that is the status quo, but it's incalculable, and that is the loss of trust. When George Floyd was killed on the streets of Minneapolis, there was a 9-year-old girl watching. Her name was Judea Reynolds, and she had on a t-shirt that said love on it. She was 9 years old. Now, one day Judea Reynolds is going to be 19, and one day she's going to be 29. What will she tell her children about the advisability of calling law enforcement? Now, she might need law enforcement because she's a victim of domestic violence. Heaven forbid. She might need it because people are committing crimes in her neighborhood or her house is broken into. She might really need to call law enforcement, but will she hesitate because of the experience that she saw? When Derek Chauvin killed George Floyd, he killed something even more than George Floyd. He killed people's trust in the guardians who are paid and trained to protect them. Loss of trust. Now, you can talk about a lot of things. You can describe police brutality a lot of ways. I prefer to describe it in terms of our Constitution. It is unconstitutional for an agent of the state to use unreasonable force, searches, and seizures on people. So the right of people to be secure in their persons and houses and papers and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrant shall issue upon probable cause supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. Police brutality is a seizure of the person. And if it is unreasonable, it's not lawful. Officers can defend their actions and do every day by saying, my action was reasonable. I acted in defense of myself. I acted in defense of others. In the Floyd case, the criminal defense lawyer who represented Derek Chauvin said, look, there was a crowd noise. He was distracted. And it really, but for that crowd, he would have been able to pay attention, and this would not have. He essentially tried to say George Floyd was a really big guy, scary guy. He didn't know if he would break out of the handcuffs. There was a lot of arguments pointing at reasonability, and of course, because that is what the legal standard is. But my point to you is that this is not just bad, it's not just unbecoming, and it's not just unseemly, it's unconstitutional. Excuse me. Now, back in the 1960s, there was something called the Kerner Commission Report. The Kerner Commission Report was commissioned by President Johnson. President Lyndon Johnson saw that there was over 2,000 civil disturbances, and almost all of them was sparked by some tragic incident between police and community. And he wanted to study these, and so he pulled this commission together. This gentleman whose picture you see is a very famous sociologist named Dr. Kenneth Clark. Now, you may have heard of him before because when Thurgood Marshall had to prove that separate but equal education was damaging to Black school children, he used, does anybody know? Louder, louder, louder. The doll study. And he said he put these black dolls and white dolls in front of Black school kids and said, which one is smarter? Which one is prettier? Now understand, we're talking about plastic. They're not prettier, they're not smarter, they're plastic. But the Black children picked the white doll over and over and over again. And then they would say, which one is you? And then they pointed to the Black one. And so who in here is a lawyer or a lawyer? I mean, I know the dean is, we got another one. Well, so for you guys who are not, you gotta prove damages as part of your lawsuit. So the Dow study was showing damage because some people say, yeah, discrimination is not nice at all, but so what? Well, the so what is you're undermining the opportunity of Black school kids to learn. And so this same sociologist said this at the Kerner Commission hearing. I read that report of the 1919 riot in Chicago, and it is as if I were reading the report of the investigating committee on the Harlem riot of 1935, the report of the Harlem riot of 1943, the report of the McComb Commission and the Watts riot. I must again, in all candor, say to you, it is a kind of Alice in Wonderland with the same movie picture, reshown over and over again, the same analysis, the same recommendations, the same inaction. And so he only goes up to 65. Well, in 91, there was something called the Christopher Commission. That was after the Rodney King case. And then we had another one, we had many more, but we had another one after Ferguson, and it was under Barack Obama. It's called 21st Century Policing. And these reports, we do them, we get well-meaning people together, and we come up with ideas. We get law enforcement together with community, together with civil rights, together with business folks, together with academics, and we come up with great solutions, and then we go back to the way we were doing things before. My argument to you is that police interaction with community that is violative of the Fourth Amendment is so damaging that it is in our interest to try to solve this problem. I can tell you that I've talked to so many police officers who tell me and have reported all over the place that they do not like the fact that in some communities they're not trusted. They join the force to help people. So many of them will report that Nobody does anything to deal with officer wellness. And many will say, look, we're blamed for all the societal ills, but we didn't make this neighborhood segregated. That was redlining that did that. They'll say, we didn't make that school district segregated. That's because of residential segregation. We didn't deny these people health care. You pay us guys a lot from rural communities to come police the city after you have neglected this community for literally hundreds of years, and you say somehow keep them away from us nice middle-class folks. Is that fair? It's a system that's not fair to anybody. Did you know police officers have a higher rate of suicide than the rest of us? It's because of the job stress. We have a situation which is screaming for reform. And sadly, friends, Barack Obama under his Attorney General, Eric Holder, had about 21 consent decrees trying to, now look, departments generally don't like these consent decrees because they're trying to make people change. But I'm telling you that the results have been positive. I'll refer you to one of your East Coast neighbors in Newark, New Jersey. They used to have a police department which was absolutely known for all kinds of abuses and all kinds of problems. They were put under a consent decree, and for the last several years, they have had no police, no loss of life incidents in Newark, New Jersey. You can reform these situations. You can improve police morale. You can improve your recruitment, but you can't do it if you just say they're thugs and let the police deal with them any way they want to. You greenlight brutality, you're going to get it. And you're going to get people frustrated, angry, who have low job satisfaction, and who would tell their kids, don't do this job. The problem now is that when Eric Holder left office, Donald Trump came in and got rid of every consent decree. And then when Merrick Garland comes back in, he started doing it again. But you can bet your bottom dollar that every consent decree that is in place now is going to be ignored by Monday, if not before. Think about that. So let me move on. I don't want to hold us back any longer, but I want to just say that this George Floyd case was it gathered world attention. I personally went to Lisbon, Portugal, Bradford, England, London, England, and Malaga, Spain, giving speeches on police community relations. Because people the world over want to know about this stuff. Why do you think, this is audience participation, why do you think people outside the United States who may not know the history of our country care about this issue? 3 thoughts. Extra points if you get it right. Because the real color issue is not necessarily pigment of the skin. The real color issue is the official blue versus the person on the ground. It boils down to abuse of official authority. So you got police brutality issues in Lagos, Nigeria, everybody's black. Kenya, same thing. This issue of making sure that governments respect the rights of people who are arrested and confined is an international problem. In our country, because of this racial history, we see everything through a racialized lens. But at the bottom line, it's fundamentally a matter of abuse of official authority. And there's nothing wrong with us making sure that government is responsive to people, not afraid of them, not that people are afraid of that official authority. So that's Derek Chauvin. I was as shocked and surprised as anyone when he was convicted. People say, did you know he was going to be convicted? I said, absolutely not. And in fact, I mean, Walter Scott, the guy who shot Walter Scott in South Carolina wasn't convicted. The people who killed Sandra Bland were convicted. The guy who killed, even Rodney King on the state trial, they were walked. Breonna Taylor, the people who killed her just got held accountable recently. The whole history of American law demonstrates that Derek Chauvin had every reason to believe he was gonna walk. And quite honestly, I think he very easily could have. Let me tell you, the first report, official report from the Minneapolis Police Department on this incident was that George Floyd, an inebriated African-American male, died of a medical emergency. But for a 17-year-old girl's video, which she uploaded at 1:46 a.m., her name is Danielle Darnella Frazier, I don't think this case would ever have hit the light of day. And let me tell you, and I'll tell you this, the people who were outraged and screaming for George Floyd's life on that corner, and you all saw it, those people believed in the police to the very end. Because when the police said, get back up on the corner, you know what they did? They got back up on the corner. And you know what else they did? They called the police. They called 911 to report what Derek Chauvin was doing because they had so much confidence in the police that they were calling the police on the police. And I try to tell police all the time, communities can't wait to fall in love with you if you let them. They see you as protector until you violate that trust. And it's to everybody's disadvantage. I would argue to you that police brutality actually is crimogenic. Because if the neighborhood knows that there's a bad relationship between police and community, they also know that these people don't call the police because they're scared to. And this will be a great place to sell dope in this corner. And this will be great. It'll be easy for me to settle a score with a business enemy who's trying to take my corner. And so I believe that police brutality, not only does it cost us a lot of money, not only does it cost us lives, not only does it cost trust, it actually results in higher rates of crime because you need police community, you need police and community to have trust and to rely and be interdependent in order to have a safe community. So we should not allow this to continue. There are clearly ways to solve it. I think I've exceeded my time. So I'm going to tell you, that's us talking about the case afterwards. And that's pretty much all I need to say for now. But there's a whole lot of stuff on there, but we need to do better. MLK talked about police brutality. It's a matter of will, it's a matter of commitments, and a matter of focus. And me and Professor Guru is going to talk about that right now. Thank you.
Well, good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for coming to the first Solomont Speaker Series event of the new year. Happy New Year to everyone. Attorney General, thank you so much for coming to Massachusetts and joining us here at Tufts today. Thank you to Tisch College, to the Political Science Department, to Tuppet for bringing us all together tonight. So I think you left us in a really good place. May 25th, 2020.
Right.
We are in the middle of a pandemic. No one knows what's going on. And the country is in lockdown. And to your point, this video gets uploaded. We're all home, nothing to do. Social media is, everywhere. What were you doing on the 25th of May, 2020?
Well, I saw this thing at about 4:45 a.m. As you heard in my introduction, I am a person of the Islamic faith. And we have a prayer in the early morning called Fajr. And I get up and pray like I'm supposed to. So I have my clock set early. And so the clock goes off. And then the clock is my phone. And so I see a little message from my staff saying, you got to watch this. You got to see this video. And I started watching this thing. And I watched it and I rewatched it. I leaned over to my wife and I said, honey, you got to watch this. She said, what is it? I said, man, this guy is just being killed right on video. She said, I don't want to see that. I don't want to see that. And that's what I was doing. But I watched it and I watched it again. And I knew it was going to be an interesting day.
Why did the governor of Minnesota call you?
Well, Tim Walz, who y'all just met last November.
Never heard of him.
Right. He's a good friend of mine. We've been friends for a long time. We went to Congress at the same time. We left Congress at the same time. And now his office is across the hall from mine. And so let me tell you, the prosecutor, criminal cases in Minnesota are prosecuted by the district attorney, generally speaking. I do have about 12 prosecutors on the AG staff who go all over the state. We do things like official misconduct, we do conflicts, and we help out tiny counties who don't have the numbers. But I mean, quite honestly, the local county attorney, who was a friend of mine, who I'm grateful to this very day, had some other cases that many people in the community felt were not handled right. And they felt like true justice wasn't brought to bear, and that was their sentiment. I'm not here to judge, I'm just telling you what people said. So there was a lot of doubt about whether he could handle the case. Then on that, remember, this thing happens on Monday, Memorial Day. That Thursday, he does a press conference. What the world didn't know is that he was trying to work out a plea negotiation that had to do with the state and federal charges. Bill Barr, we now know, said no deal. So this plea deal that they were trying to work out falls apart. So when there is a high-profile event, you call a press conference to announce a deal that now is not going to happen. This is advice to any of y'all who want to run for office. Eat it. Just say, sorry, we thought we had something to announce, we don't. Do not go up there with nothing to say, because you are going to say something that you will regret. And what he said in response to a press question is that we don't know if we're going to increase the charges or charge the others because we're still getting information in, and some of it is not consistent with a charge. Now remember, people all over the world saw this video. What he was trying to do is be a responsible prosecutor and not make a charge decision based on public sentiment, but based on the evidence. What it sounded like is he wasn't going to charge. That night, the 3rd Precinct, a police station, went up in flames, along with a whole bunch of other buildings. The next day, the governor says, I kind of need your help on this. All about to happen.
So, Mr. Attorney General, let's bring it to the academy where we are.
Yeah.
You talk a lot about, and this is in your book and in your speeches, you talk a lot about what the role of the academy is, the role of higher education in breaking the wheel of injustice. And I want to ask you first, why is your book called Breaking the Wheel, but also what is the role of higher education? And this is really important for Tufts because we have a very civically engaged student body. We have a civically engaged faculty and staff as well. What is our role? What's our charge?
Well, and again, I know how presumptuous it is for me to come here and give you homework assignments, right? But
we are in a university.
We are in a university. We need you, whether you're a professor or whether you're a student, whether you are an expert in statistics and statistical analysis, or whether you use more qualitative methods to help us figure out how we get from the status quo that I described up there to a new way. Because we're spending buckets of money on civil judgments, we're losing lives, we have trust problems between police and community, and we seem to be having a lot of difficulty figuring our way out. There's a lot of things that people propose. I need you to figure out, does that really work? Does training really work? You might say yes, you might say no. Is it wise to put all of our eggs in the training basket? If you say yes, my question to you is, what training did Derek Chauvin not get? We took up a morning's worth of testimony, said, well, did you learn CPR? Yes, I did. Did you pass? Yes, I did. Where's exams? There it is. Did you learn about use of force? Did you learn? He was trained. 2 of the rookies, and they were rookies, had just gotten out of the academy and were trained on the duty to intervene when a fellow officer is doing something that violates the law, and the duty to give assistance to somebody in trouble. So I can keep going, but my real question is, how do we solve this problem? Look, police departments there's 18,000 police departments across this country. They almost all have had real problems recruiting. I believe policing is an honorable profession, and there's just more great human beings being police officers than I can name. And I know that because I've been a criminal defense lawyer, I've been a prosecutor, I know them. But I'm also telling you that it doesn't take like half the department to be bad to have a bad department. How important is leadership? How important, what role do the unions play? Are they playing a productive role when it comes to improving police community relations? What is the role of technology? Police, I mean, like when you drive down an intersection, you probably had somebody take a picture of your car. Could we use more of that to reduce the number of police stops? Reduce the interaction, might yield fewer bad interactions. These are all important questions, and we need you to answer those questions because let me tell you, and I was talking to the dean about this, so many of the things that you see politicians arguing for are ideas that came out of academia. You ever heard of something called Obamacare? You think Obama thought of that? Well, I think it comes from Massachusetts in the first place. But before it was there, it was an academic institution. So my point is, there are a number of great ideas that you all had the capacity to study. And we desperately need it in this area. Yes, we spend too much money on police brutality lawsuits, but more important than that, the men and women who put that uniform on deserve us thinking about how to make their job easier, and the men and women who populate our streets and go about their lives every day deserve us to think about how to make their lives easier, both. So that's, I can keep going, but I'll stop right there.
So you mentioned leaders, you mentioned politicians,
Right.
which leads me to my next question. So in your book, you write, quote, "The murder of George Floyd offered the possibility that a critical mass of the American public was ready to take decisive action to end state-sponsored violence against African Americans and all Americans." So with that critical mass that you say existed in 2020, you talk in your book and in your speeches about the biggest disconnect we face right now is between the political will of the people and policy outcomes. And what is that tension and how does that play out in decision-making, not just in Minnesota, but throughout the United States?
Well, was there anybody in here that participated in one of the post-George Floyd demonstrations? A lot of folks did, right?
Raise your hands up.
I mean, you know, I don't want to out you if you don't want to say that's cool, but let me tell you, and this is sort of a pattern, interestingly enough. After incidents of extreme bad police, a deadly force encounter with police, followed by civil unrest, there often is backlash. And then, by the time 2020 was over, we were in the middle of a upsurging crime. 2021 certainly saw that, and now it's gone back down again. I'm telling you that Nixon, one of the reasons that Nixon was able to become the president, and is that because you had some mid-decade tragic incidents involving police brutality. You had Watts, you had a lot of things. And then by the late 1960s, you're starting to get a law and order sentiment going, and Nixon rides in on that. So it's important to understand that these things do have a certain wave effect. What I'll say though is that the time is always right to do what is right. And we need to be able to step up and improve police community relations. We shouldn't stop just because of the moment we happen to be in. The reality is we're still paying out more than we should for police misconduct cases. We're still having recruitment challenges. We're still burning out officers who want to do the job right. And the urgency is still there. So again, one of the problems is we go through these waves, and what's possible in one moment is not possible in another. But the needs of our society don't change. So let's not let our energy change, which is why your scholarship on how to resolve this issue is so important.
I want to open up to some questions from the audience. Brief questions, brief answers. One thing I always like to remind people is a question is a sentence that ends in a question mark statement, not a manifesto. So if anyone has a question, please raise your hand. The lovely Jessica Burns and Shanley over there are going to pass you the mic. So we have a question right there. And please introduce yourself.
I'll stand. Hi, Attorney General. My name is Felix Bhattacharya. I'm a senior studying international relations.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. My question is about trust. You spoke a lot about trust in your opening remarks. So how do we reinstill trust in the police, in law enforcement? And since I'm an IR major, I have to ask about the global scale. If it's about authority, how do we reinstill trust with this authority still existing? Thank you.
Well, look, once trust is broken, it's not easy to restore. But I will tell you, it's not impossible. I would study, some of the cases, there's some case studies out there. Look at Newark. If you're interested in if you got a paper coming up on this issue, I would dig into Newark and some of the history there. They had an awful relationship. I mean, it was really bad. And there was some police scandals that didn't have to do with citizens, it had to do with behavior on the force, evidence locker or stuff like that. And yet, after the consent decree, which is still in place, they saw some dramatic reductions in deadly force incidents. And they also saw some reductions, and they collected a lot of guns. If you rebuild trust, people will tell you who's doing what where to make the neighborhood safer. So I can tell you that how you rebuild trust, first of all, you have to start and you have to try. If you won't try because you don't believe it's possible, you won't ever get there. But you got to bring people together. You may need to fire some people and bring in some new people. We brought in a new police chief from outside. Brian O'Hara's from Newark, New Jersey. You just begin to meet with people in the community who are willing to talk, and you slowly move it back, right? Are we where we need to be? Not quite yet. We also did some structural changes. In Minneapolis, it used to be that the police department was a freestanding agency within the city government. Now we have a Department of Public Safety, which includes both, youth violence prevention, police department, even 911, to sort of try to coordinate better. We have a civilian group that even the police sometimes call if the police aren't really needed on the scene, but there is a crisis, right? Who intervene a lot of time in mental health crisis. What we learned is that maybe as much as 10 to 40% of deadly force encounters with police are because of people in a mental health crisis. Now, some of those people actually have attacked the police. That's a fact. But that doesn't mean they weren't in a mental health crisis. It meant, but many of them are not in a healthcare. So what we know is that if people who are neurodivergent, autistic, sometimes when they're in an autistic meltdown, they will ball their fists, they will stare straight ahead, they will not listen to commands. Well, police might be trained that is a sign that somebody's about to strike you. So what do? You subdue them. And if they feel like they're resistant, what do? You use more force. And there have been people killed in this situation. So, like I said, training is part of it. Training officers what to recognize. But then sometimes we do ask police for an awful lot. They got to deal with juveniles. They got to deal with people with mental health crisis. They got to deal with people dealing with addiction. They got to do all this other stuff. So thank you for the question.
You talked about police violence as being an issue of authority, and I was wondering what you thought about it being an issue of class and the ability of the very wealthy to divide and conquer people who would otherwise be natural allies.
Well, let me just say, Look, we live in a country with a certain history regarding class and race. We both, right? It's not a surprise that the first police departments were in South Carolina and they were slave patrols. It's also not a surprise that one of the first departments was here in Boston, and it was around dealing with the industrial workers in New York as well. So we've seen history grow up. We've seen throughout history that oftentimes, people have been employed to protect property of people with a lot of property or maintain a racial hierarchy. And these things, that's just a part. But here's the thing about it. The police didn't do redlining, which is putting Black people into a Bantu stand and say, you can only live here. And once they can only live there, then they can only go to school there. They can only get healthcare there. They can only, all these kind of things that flow from that. Well, so what I'll say to you is that you can't explain American unequal relations on the police. It really has to do with class, like you said, has to do with our racial history. And we have employed the realtors, the school teachers, the health workers. We've employed a lot of people to maintain these hierarchies, and we've employed the police, who after all arrested Rosa Parks. That is a clear indication that we have used police to maintain a racial hierarchy. When Martin Luther King was arrested 30 times for breaking our race laws, he wasn't arrested by, the dog catcher in that city. He was arrested by the police or the sheriff. So we have used police to do this. The reality is there's a dual function of police in American society. One is actually truly public safety. And another one is to maintain these political dynamics and relationships. And we mix the two all the time. So we never get to the real conversation. I would argue that rape, murder, and robbery happens. And we need somebody to investigate it. But when you intermix that with these race and class dynamics, you damage the trust that's needed to maintain a safe community. So yeah, I think you're right. Police have been employed that way, but that's not the whole story, right? So anyway, thank you.
Question right there. Maybe take one or two more questions.
Well, hey, Tony, my brother has a question.
Okay. We have a student here, and then we'll go to. I'm sorry.
Say
Yeah,
both.
we'll take 2 questions. Yes. Okay. Go.
Thank you, Attorney General, for coming. My question relates to the Minneapolis 2021 ballot initiative, which was to get rid of the police department.
Sure.
And to create the Office of Public Safety.
Right.
What are your thoughts on that, and why do you think it failed quite significantly?
Yeah.
Mr. Ellison as well. Your question?
I'll answer that one. That was
Okay, so let me just say quickly. So it actually didn't fail quite significantly. It failed like 44 to like 56. And when you can calculate the number of votes, it's not clear to me that it was, well, why do I think it failed? Here's why I think it actually failed. Because if you go to low-income people of color in particular, and you tell them that the one service that they know that they need, which is safety, they're not going to have, they're not going to react like more middle-class, safe people think they are. They're going to say, them guys was shooting at each other down the street last night, and I would like to be able to call somebody to put a stop to it. And so I think that a lot of the organizers didn't really realize that. They thought that because of George Floyd, that people just hated the police, and they didn't understand that people don't hate the police, they hate bad police. And if they hate anyone, you know what I mean? And then the other thing, and this is, I also believe this to be true, Minneapolis, and it sounds like you do know a little bit about Minneapolis, has large swaths of it are upper middle class white neighborhoods who understand that what happened to George Floyd was really sad. But if they have to put up with a George Floyd every now and again to be safe in their comfortable Kenwood home, they're willing to go with that. So that's part of the dynamic. I think that the people who were pushing it didn't quite understand. They didn't help people understand that, one, we're not getting rid of the police department. There will be a police department. But what will be, and here's, isn't it funny that even that the mayor and the city council did what was proposed in the ballot initiative, which people rejected. You follow what I'm saying? There is a Department of Public Safety. It does reorganize public safety. And yet, at the ballot, people said no. And I think it's because of some of those dynamics. I think that if the organize, and here, who were the organizers? Really good, well-intentioned people, but they're people who, okay, so don't get mad at me because I'm just telling you the truth. Here, a lot of them were younger. A lot of them had an analysis that police are inherently racist and serve capitalism and are unredeemable and cannot be made to operate in the public interest. And that they are only there to protect capital and racial hierarchy and therefore defund the police. And I think that they ended up miscalculating how the majority of people see the police. But I will tell you that Black residents of Minneapolis and white residents of Minneapolis who are upper income may not have voted no for the same reason.
In 1976, I beat you in pool.
I don't remember that.
No, just joking.
Good.
I'm a lawyer in Boston. They have implemented the body worn camera. I see these things day in and day out. One thing that I have noticed is it does equalize the encounters between civilians and police. Have you, and could you give your remarks on that tool, and has it had a reform effect on police interactions?
You know, I would say that, and this, I haven't looked at any numbers, Tony, but I would say that it has had a beneficial effect in Minneapolis and in many other places I've seen. I think there's more to be done with the video, though. I think a lot of times we just use the video to see who did what wrong. But I think you can use the video as a training tool. You can say, okay, officer, you're not in trouble. Nobody's in trouble. But when you spoke to them that way, that might have agitated the situation more than it needed to be. Or you could even use it to say, look, you know, here's a person with a knife, a deadly weapon. What if instead of going up to them and trying to tackle them and now you have to shoot them, what if you just gave them some distance, called some mental health professionals in there, cordoned them off? I mean, so it's a good tool. I just think it's underutilized. And I'm gonna tell you this, here we are, we're sitting up here in Tufts. Is there anybody willing to write a paper on how we might use body cam video even more extensively to improve outcomes? So.
Sounds like a great capstone project for someone. Want to ask our last question? And as it happens, just a really quick reaction. In addition to teaching on campus, I teach in prison through the Tufts University Prison Initiative of Tisch College. And I actually asked my students, we had a class on social contract theory, and I asked them if government should exist. And my students in prison said yes. And then all unanimously. And then the other question I asked, which I got a unanimous response for, is should police exist? And they all said yes. And I was not expecting a unanimous response. So that I found that to be very interesting too. But you want to ask our last question?
Yeah. So thank you so much for joining us. I
Yeah,
enjoyed listening to your responses. My question to you is, you've alluded a little bit to yourself being a person, especially a man of faith. And I was interested in what ways your faith influences your lawyering and your general outlook on police brutality and the issue that you're so passionate about?
You know what? This is a good question. It's a very good question. Thank you for asking it. So here's the thing. My faith tells me that all people are invested with core dignity. And so I really feel that that is the right way to engage the world. So I'm not gonna be the one even to say that Derek Chauvin is beyond God's mercy, right? I wrote a letter when he was assaulted in prison demanding that he be protected. We don't want him dead. We want him to just be accountable for the crime he committed, but we want him to be safe. And I was actually pretty sad when he got hurt. Also, I believe that I'm like an optimist, I believe we can fix police brutality. We can fix unreasonable force. It can be done, right? We've just got to abandon our belief that somehow we need excessive force to keep the restive elements in check, if you know what I mean. I think some people think we need police brutality. How else are we going to keep those people in the hood from misbehaving? They need to get wrapped upside the head every once and again and to see who's boss. That attitude exists. If we abandon that crazy idea, we believe that all people want to be safe, all people want to support the people who are supporting their safety, then we come from a different place. And this is all kind of based on my understanding of the divine. Right? And so I would say that we could go on this conversation for a long time, but at the end of the day, the last thing I'll say about my faith is that it helps me keep getting up in the morning working on this. Because, there's something about meditation, prayer, and renewal that can keep you moving. Now, I'm gonna tell you, I got a lot of friends who are absolutely atheists. I love them anyway. I don't care. That's their business. But you asked me about my faith, and so that's my answer. Thank you.
And this is such a beautiful way to wrap up this public forum. In your book, you emphasize that we must be explicit in our efforts to hold on to the human tragedy at the center of George Floyd's death. And I wish none of us knew George Floyd's name, but this is where we are. And just on behalf of Tufts, Tisch College, the Department of Political Science, Tuppet, Mr. Attorney General, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Seb.
Today.